Welcome to the Great Loop aboard the Perch. This is like 79 of our Great Loop adventure, and I'm Kim Russo with America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. Today we're going from Columbus, Mississippi to Demopolis, Alabama. This is going to be a long day. It's about a 100-mile run, and 3 of the 5 locks remaining for us on the Tenn-Tom waterway are going to happen today. So for the second time in a row, we pulled off the dock before sunrise. So there's a little bit of video of us cruising our way out of the marina and towards the first lock, which is the Stennis Lock. We don't particularly like to cruise at night. Particularly arriving at night is not fun. So we much prefer to get up and leave a marina while it is still dark, especially when there's a lock right there like this one. So much like the day before, we are arriving at the lock while it's still dark, knowing that there'll be a wait, and then once we enter the lock, you can see the sun is coming up. By the time we've dropped down in the lock and the doors have opened and we're on our way, it is daylight. One of the first things we saw after we left the lock here was a tow. You can see these tows are pushing barges and they are immense. So always communicate with the tow captains, make sure that you have arranged to pass them on the side that they prefer, as they know the rivers really well. So as I mentioned, 3 locks today, almost 100 miles, or actually a little bit over 100 miles to travel. And this is a very rural area of the Great Loop, so don't expect to have a lot of cell coverage, unless perhaps if you have a Starlink, you'll still have internet connection. But it's a winding river without a lot to see other than the beauty of nature. We did start to see some alligators as we continued south. I believe the first one may not have been above Demopolis. There is a phone booth, believe it or not, just kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of a looper folklore type spot to see the phone booth on the side of the Tenn-Tom in absolutely the middle of nowhere. So we hit the second lock. This is the Bevel Lock. Our buddy boat Light and Salty is still there leading the way. A few other looper boats were in the lock with us. And just a gorgeous day for cruising. You can see the dam there at the Bevel Lock, and you can see another floating bollard. All of these locks on the Tenn-Tom really have the same bollards, but this one has the ears, which makes me very happy because, as I had said in the last video, with the Perch's midship being very high above the waterline, having those ears just makes it much easier to keep the line wrapped around the bollard. We kept a slow and steady pace of about 10 knots for most of the day. We had done the calculation to know that that would be a good pace to get us where we wanted to be before it got too dark. And also to conserve fuel over going super fast, and we didn't want to be waking anyone on the river. There's very little along the shore here, but of course anytime you see a boat launch or a fishing boat that is anchored or trawling, you just of course want to make sure not to wake them. Always courteous boating, that's kind of the first thing about looping. So one more lock and we would be kind of home free, so to speak, for the day. The last one for today is the Heflin Lock. And as we entered the Heflin Lock, a little bit of a wait here, but not too badly. We've been really lucky with the locks on the Tenn-Tom. We really haven't had significant waits at any of them. But that is exiting the Heflin Lock. You can see the chamber's pretty empty by this point. I believe it was just us and Light and Salty that were in the lock. So that is what the lock looks like after you have been dropped, and the big empty cavernous lock is there as you're exiting and passing by those enormous walls. At this point, it was still pretty early in the afternoon, so still plenty of time to make Demopolis, but we knew we still had a long way to go. Really interesting to see how the river curves through this area. You can see how many miles you're actually doing when, if you were on a straighter course, it would be much fewer miles, and there's lots of oxbows like that coming up along the river. But very rural area, beautiful cruising ground. It's a little bit past the peak of fall colors at this point, so you can kind of see winter is setting in even this far south as we're continuing on. But it's a beautiful area if you just enjoy cruising through nature. The White Cliffs of Epes are kind of a landmark here, and you can see the beauty of the White Cliffs. There were still a little bit of the fall color left on those trees at the top, so really just a beautiful sight to see as you're cruising through. You'll also come to some bridges next to the cliffs, which just makes a really nice contrast of the man-made things and the nature and the beauty of the two when they come together. So it was a lovely part of the cruise towards Demopolis, and we'll see some more of those as we continue and as the day goes on. So at this point, it's getting pretty close to 4 o'clock. We've got an hour to 2 hours left of daylight. This was before the end of daylight savings time. So we just continued to snake our way through the river and work our way towards Demopolis, which is really the next town that you'll see through this waterway. But as I mentioned, more of the beautiful White Cliffs, and there they are. And as the sun started to drop lower in the sky, it was just even more beautiful as the sun was casting that late day light on some of the trees. So you'll see that here. But that late daylight also, of course, also means the sun's getting ready to set. So it was starting to look like we'd be out there a little bit after dark before we reached Demopolis. The sun started to set, which was absolutely gorgeous, and we knew that we were close and didn't have any obstacles between us and where we were trying to be. So it wasn't an uncomfortable feeling. There's the beautiful sunset as we were just finishing up the cruise for the day. And one more picture of the sun going down and light and salty, and the moon. It was pretty close to a full moon, which also helps if you're cruising before sunrise or after sunset. You've got that beautiful full moon to help light the way for you. So all in all, a really enjoyable day. Even though we arrived a little bit after dark, we were able to take on some fuel. We still had a little bit of daylight left. It was kind of dark as we were working our way to our slip in Demopolis, but they were fabulous with coming out with flashlights and kind of waving us to where we needed to be. So here's a look at our Nebo track and our Nebo log. Almost 12 hours underway, a little over 100 nautical miles. We averaged 9 knots and were able to speed up to almost 18 at one particular point in time. As I said, a long day, not something I would want to do repeatedly day after day, but it was really a beautiful day of cruising, and we were thankful to have arrived safely. We'll be back soon with our next leg, which will continue down the Tenn-Tom. Thank you for watching.